Welcome to 28.5, where we explore a unique and authentic perspective on the women's game, break down upcoming matchups, and discuss the latest news and trends in women's basketball. We are your hosts. I'm Sydney Story, and I played at the University of Tennessee under Pat Summitt.
And I'm Becca Goodman, and I played at the University of Notre Dame under Muffet McGraw. And we're thrilled to have you join us today. Before we jump in, make sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you enjoy what you hear, be sure to tune in each week and support and share the love. Now let's get started with today's episode. Hello, Sid. How's it going?
What's up, Beck? How are you doing, friend?
I'm good. Good. Watching a lot of basketball. It's kind of that awkward lull before the holidays. Teams, schedule a few games. It's still non-conference. Some have played and started conference, or it's like the easier conference games. So needless to say, basketball is basketball. It's always great when we get to watch it. But some of these games, I'm ready for the new year. I'm ready for it to get roll your sleeves up, get some conference play going, and hit the hardwood. What do you think?
Yeah, it's like that weird time across the board, even at work. It's just like this lull period where people are ready to jump into the holidays here, spend time with family and friends. And I think on the women's basketball, the basketball scene in general, there's some of those games that aren't the best matchups. And hopefully your subs can get in and play quite a bit before you head into conference play. So it's that weird time we're in right now. But we did have some good games over the weekend that we're excited about.
Yeah, for sure. So we have 4 good quarters for you today. We're going to highlight the Ohio State versus Stanford game. Then we'll go to the Nebraska-Georgia Tech game. We'll do more of a deep dive around the USC-UConn matchup, the premier marquee matchup there. And then in our fourth quarter, we got a bit of an upset to update everybody on. So let's get rolling.
Let's get rolling. So quarter number 1, we have Ohio State versus Stanford. And we haven't really highlighted Ohio State yet. They've been ranked around that 11th mark, just outside the top 10. They've kind of been hanging around because they haven't lost yet. They haven't really played anybody yet until, in my mind, the Stanford matchup. And I was excited to watch them. Kevin McGuff, he brings that full court press, that 2-2-1. He's known for that. He'll do that against pretty much everyone he plays. So it was fun to watch how this team is handling that this year. And for Stanford, they have had a rocky go at it playing some of these top 25 teams this year. So I was curious to see how they were progressing. And honestly, not the best here. I thought Ohio State really handled them the entire game. They won 84-59. So a pretty big, handedly butt-kicking game for the Buckeyes. So this game takes place in San Francisco. It was the Invisalign Bay Area Women's Classic at the Warriors Arena, which is a very cool place to play, I'm sure. I've never been there or anything, but it's awesome when you get a chance to play in an NBA arena. And heading into this game, Ohio State was averaging 14 steals per game. Speaks a lot to the defensive pressure they bring, that full court press they bring for the entire game. They have a freshman point guard. She was out for the second game in a row with an injury, so Madison Green started instead, and I thought Madison did a great job. Cody McMahon, she comes in averaging 18.6 points per game, 3.4 rebounds, and 2 assists per game. She really is their go-to player. She gets all the hype for Ohio State, as she should. She's a great player. And then Kevin McGuff, want to do a little shout out to him because he's been in the game for so long now. Becca and I knew him back in the day when we were going through recruiting and the entire process. And he's been a coach at several great schools. He was at Notre Dame for years as an assistant with Muffet. He was at Xavier. He's been at Ohio State now 12 seasons.
Yeah, he's a great coach. Great coach. Yeah,
he is a great coach, great guy. He's had 7 NCAA appearances in those 12 seasons at Ohio State. His record at Ohio State is 209-106. So speaks to what he's been able to do at Ohio State. They've been at the top of the Big Ten Conference for a long time here, right? You've got the Iowa Hawkeyes who have had a big run and some of these other programs that have stepped it up in the Big Ten, but Ohio State seems to always be in the conversation. And that's kudos to what Kevin McGuff brings year in and year out in the Big Ten with Ohio State there. And then Stanford, we've talked quite a bit about Stanford in a lot of games already this season. Nuna Agara, she averages 17.4 points per game coming in, 7.1 rebounds, 2.4 assists. And then Kate Pay. That's the big headliner for Stanford this year is Tara steps down after last season, Kate Pay stepping in this year. And how is she handling her first season as the head coach? She was an assistant for 17 years. So this is her time to take the reins and really fill that role. During the game, it was fun because Tara came on. They did an interview with Tara, and she had talked about how Kate Pay was so ready for this. And I think Kate Pay, hopefully she can get things back on track. I think conference play in the ACC is going to be huge for her. But let's jump back into that in-game analysis for the Ohio State versus Stanford game. Like I said, Ohio State wins this one 84-59. And really, from the get-go, Ohio State starts in that 2-2-1 press. They really set and dictated the speed of this game and the momentum of this game from the get-go. Stanford couldn't handle it. And Ohio State won the first quarter 16-6, and it was pretty much over at that point. It just seemed like Stanford couldn't get a bucket. You ever have that in a game, Becca, where you're just like, we're just not our team right now. We're off. Like there's something going on. And Stanford, I think, definitely had that almost the entire game. And kudos to Ohio State because I thought they brought the defensive pressure to kind of force some of that, and Stanford just never really withstood the punch.
I think it's shocking that Stanford had a game like that. I'm not saying they're invincible. It's just they're so high IQ base that I would assume they would be throwing anything to kind of get things rolling. I mean, I know they've lost a couple players, right? Kiki going over to USC. That's a huge just change in general. A lot of new players coming in. But yeah, just kind of shocking. And, you know, it's the end of when girls get to probably go home for a couple days for Christmas. You and I know better than anyone. It was very much like focus in, get this job done, then think about it. And you even see that in any of their post game when they're in the locker room. The coaches are now saying, look, stay focused. You took care of business. Go home. Continue working on your game. Come back. We got to get to work. So maybe there was a little bit of that going on there. I just expected it to be somewhat for sure closer, seeing as Stanford's been flirting with being ranked towards the end of the end of the top 25, and then to see them obviously fall off. I just thought this would kind of be a good comeback game for sure. But we've seen that everywhere with teams just having issues getting points on the board,
Absolutely.
Which is nuts. It's kind of nuts, right?
And it's weird to see Stanford like that because for years,
we've never seen them.
Yeah, it's always like in the top 10 at least, right?
Yeah.
So it's definitely a new era over with the Cardinal. Heading into the third quarter, Stanford does score 3 quick buckets to start the half. So, and it was talked about with the commentators too, very obvious. I think the other piece of it on the offensive end was like, we need to start getting the ball inside, right? They weren't hitting shots. Let's get it inside. Let's try to get some higher percentage shots to fall. So they score 3 quick buckets, and I'm thinking to myself, maybe they're going to turn this thing around. But then Ohio State comes back on a run, and they never really were really going to recover there. For me, overall on this one, Stanford turned the ball over 19 times, and a lot of that, again, was Ohio State's pressure and their full court press. Ohio State only turned the ball over 6 times. So
the whole game?
The whole game. So like,
dang.
Everyone wants to talk about the defense that Ohio State can bring and what they do with that press, but they were taking care of the basketball also. Wow. And you know that Stanford still has a disciplined defense, a disciplined offense, and 6 turnovers in the game. The other thing is Stanford shot 23 for 59 from the field and only 2 for 16 from the 3. So, I mean, this is a big piece of it too. Stanford just had no rhythm for shooting. I mean, just an off night for them. That's 12.5% from the 3-point line. It's pretty bad there.
Yeah.
And then balanced scoring for Ohio State. They had 6 players in double figures, led by Cody with 16 points. So not a huge standout performance, but when you've got 6 players that are going to score 10 plus points, that's some balanced scoring that was happening on the Ohio State side. And I thought one of the more fun things about the game was that interview with Tara and her talking about that class that she's now going to be teaching at Stanford, which seems awesome.
Oh, do tell.
Yeah, so she's teaching a class and she's bringing in folks like Steve Kerr, this whole big lineup of people that are going to come and be essentially guest professors with her in this class. And it's a continuous education class, so it's not just for Stanford students either. It's pretty much open to the public to sign up for this class. So very cool to see her paying it forward a little bit, really continuing to educate people, but just in a different way. A very Tara thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Coach McGraw is also doing some of that at Notre Dame, so she's still around campus teaching a class as well. You know, teachers always want to teach no matter what to some degree in some way. So it's two greats that were in the game a long time that just wanted to kind of stay in front of the classroom and continue giving back. So that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, very cool. And that's pretty much a wrap on that game. I mean, it was
Okay.
kind of over before it
Yeah.
started almost with that first quarter and Ohio State really taking the reins.
All right, so let's jump into our second quarter where we're going to talk about Georgia Tech beating Nebraska. Georgia Tech won 72-61. Again, this is a game where, both of them are ranked. Georgia Tech is 17th, Nebraska's 23rd. But getting wins against teams like this, whether you're the lower seed or not, is just a good morale boost, right? Especially before the Christmas holiday, you get a little break. And to see Nebraska, I was looking at their schedule a bit. This was their first ranked opponent that they faced. I'm not by any means saying an easier schedule, but it's just different when you have a number in front of it, mentally, physically, and prep wise. So, first time that Nebraska played a ranked opponent, this coming Sunday, they play UCLA. So they're going to go from not playing anybody ranked to, a nice 17 seed, get their feet wet to boom, number one, right? So I think they're going to be in for kind of a rude awakening. We mentioned this on our last podcast episode, different calibers and tiers of teams. But I think this will just be a good stepping stone to see where Nebraska's at. I think they're normally known as a volleyball school. It's awesome to see them in the top 25, period. And Georgia Tech has always been just this scrappy, head down, ready to ball out team that is just dying for being closer to the top 10. And I remember playing them, and it was always like, if you don't come here and take care of business, it's going to be an L, and that's going to go on your record, right? Like it is absolutely nobody to overlook. And this specific team, currently 13-0, they're on one of their best starts in program history. And the week before, they upset UNC by 6. So they're rolling, they're confident, they're getting points off the bench. Danny Carney is coming off the bench and having almost a double-double, putting up 20 points. I mean, anytime you can get one person that is consistent and come in and kind of give your team that boost of energy, let alone 20. 20 and 8, Sid. I mean, that's literally bringing in a double-double, and it's not like it's 10 points. That was 20, right? So Georgia Tech just played lights out, super aggressive, constantly driving to the basket, just trying to beat Nebraska inside. Nebraska, on the other hand, had Markowski, where that's their big post player that they like to go into, feed her the ball. They're always looking for her. They have a nice little dribble weave where she's just kind of consistently posting up. She had a nice 20 and 10 game, took 19 shots, made 8 of them, played most of the game, but they just need more, right? Need more firepower. Turnover wise, it was pretty even and low. Nebraska had 12, Georgia Tech had 9. Rebounds, Nebraska 39, Georgia Tech 42. But this is where I think the game really went one or the other. So the free throws, and we're going to talk about this in many games, but Nebraska was 9 for 10. So they got to the line 10, they got 10 shots, right? Georgia Tech was 18 of 21. So percentage-wise, awesome, right? Both were high up there, but anytime you can get to the free throw line 21 times and put up 18 points, those are free points, everybody. Free points. And that's the difference in the ball game. They lose by 9, and that's the difference in the free throw line.
Yeah, and I think that's what Georgia Tech brings right now. When you're getting to the free throw line that many times, it says to me that you're attacking the rack hard. You're being aggressive on the offensive end. If you're standing out in the 3-point line, you're not going to get a free throw opportunity. Right?
Yep.
But it means that you're really putting the pressure on the defense. You're moving the ball. You're attacking those gaps, and you're trying to score. You're the aggressor. And I think that's what Georgia Tech brings to the table. And then obviously they knock them down. Both teams knock them down. But when you're getting there, that's a huge difference in points right there.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So as we mentioned, Nebraska is going to take on UCLA. That's going to be a huge battle for them that they got to really get ready to rock and roll on. And obviously Lauren Betts, we don't really know how much longer she'll be out. She's been injured, so she didn't play in the last game. So maybe Markowski will go off again inside for them. And Georgia Tech will open up ACC play again with Pitt. So they'll follow up this Sunday as well.
It's going to be interesting to see how Nebraska does in the Big Ten this year.
Yep, for sure.
The Big Ten is loaded.
Loaded.
Last year was like a contender, right? Yeah. They were playing down the stretch with teams. And this year, they're going to be kind of middle of the pack-ish, I think. Or it's going to be interesting.
No, absolutely. And, another team we really haven't dug into quite a bit, but I don't doubt that they'll jump on our radar to some degree, Minnesota and Rutgers, right? Those were Rutgers specifically was always a go-to Big Ten team. I mean, when they were in the Big East before they jumped over, right? So they bring a different level of athleticism and gameplay that is just, it's just second to none. So I'm interested to catch a couple of their games as well, just to kind of see how they're leveling up.
And that's Caquise Washington. There's some big reigns that she took over there too.
Absolutely.
From C. Vivian Stringer, who's a Hall of Famer and one of the best coaches to coach in our game, which speaks to the program that Rutgers was and is capable of being. When you and I played, I mean, C. Vivian had those girls rolling. They were always good.
No, I mean, that was, like I said, the band was equally as mean as the girls on the team and as hard as the game was. So without a doubt, going there was rough. It was a battle every time. Very well-disciplined team. Always seemed to have the right type of players. Their bigs were big. They were solid. They were strong, and they ran the floor. Their guards, quick, athletic, hit threes, just brought a different style of play that just made the game so much faster.
Epiphany Prince, Cappy Pondexter,
Erica Wheeler.
Yeah.
Who's now in the Fever, right? So, no, absolutely.
All right, are we ready to jump into the third quarter here? So we have, drum roll, the game of the weekend, if not one of the best matchups of the season so far. USC coming in at number 7 versus UConn number 4. And the interesting thing about this game to me was both teams have one loss coming into the season, and it was against Notre Dame.
I know.
So
I know.
For me, it's kind of like a benchmark to see how they've responded since that loss. And have they gotten better? Have they corrected some of those things that maybe they needed to correct? I thought that this game in specific was going to be really telling for USC. It's a big stage. They were playing one of those Fox Saturday night primetime special games, which I think is amazing for women's basketball that we're now getting those. It's at the XL Center.
Yep, basically UConn's second home. Right there in town. It's where the Big East tournament always was. Absolutely can be packed.
So I listened to the presser after the game, and I thought it was really cool because Gino was talking about some game. He's like, the first time we played at the XL Center, he's like, it was in the 1980s. I think he even had the year. I think it was like 1986 or something like that. And he said, I think maybe there was 100 people in the crowd.
Oh, wow.
He said it was a double header. The women were playing first and the men were going to play second. He's like, obviously, once the men game, there was the break in between and there was going to be the men game. The gym filled up. But like for us, he's like, we had 100 people. So he was like, I kind of took a moment and looked around and just like soaked that up, that it was sold out, over 16,000 people there. Very cool.
Absolutely. It's not only the Paige and Juju show, right? You have Sarah Strong, right? Freshman post player. You have Kiki. I mean, the matchups here, as we go through the game, certain people stand out more often and more consistently. And it's kind of the lights are on, roll the ball out, play, and show up. And they absolutely did. This was a good one. I'm excited to dig in here.
Really telling it, before we jump into the stats and the flow of the game, like you're saying, both coaches know that they have high caliber players. For the majority of the game, you saw man-to-man defense.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And Gottlieb even talked about it heading into halftime. She's like, I trust my team body to body. We're going to match up against this team. And I think that just speaks to the caliber of those two coaches and then obviously the players on the floor where, to your point, let's roll it up and play. Like they're not trying to throw some like junk defenses out there and catch people off guard. They're like, no, my team can beat yours. Let's just straight up play the game. I love
mean,
that.
And
that's the best
you saw
basketball.
that. Yeah, you saw that during the game. Just, when Paige would hit a shot, staring down Juju, you saw, and the caliber as you're talking about is just Juju's ability to play like one-on-one is nuts. She reminds me so much of Kobe because she's so fast, but it's slow when you watch it. And if you're a defender, you buy it. You're buying what she's selling. And she never looks panicked to me. She could be turning the ball over and she's still just like, all right, no big deal. Like she's just, And at times you see her get frustrated, whether it's officiating or, the play itself. But I mean, that girl is just so smooth. I know. Let's get into it. Sorry. That was my tangent.
I think Kobe is the perfect analogy. I mean, how she finishes and moves her body, and she's fantastic. There's that debate that's going on in social media right now of who's the best player in the country. Is it Paige? Is it Juju? Is it Hannah Hidalgo? They all so obviously different. They play so differently. Yeah. It's like even like when people talk about Michael and LeBron and throw Kobe in there, they're just different players. So it's hard to pick one right now, and which is great for our game.
Yeah. Before we jump in, I just want to highlight, it was great to see AZ Fudd back for UConn with limited minutes, and Kennedy Smith was back for USC. So she was out early on. So I think the first game that she missed was versus Notre Dame, actually. So great to see these teams just full strength. You never want to say you got a dub or not have everybody ready to go, and then it's something after the fact. But no, it was just great to see them both back and ready to go.
Yep. All right, let's do it. Let's jump into some game analysis. So to start the game, and really it was the story of the entire first half, but to start the game, USC jumps to a 9-0 lead, which does not happen a lot against UConn.
Or
ever.
At the XL Center, for sure.
There you go. It just shows how USC was ready for the moment. Juju came out swinging. It wasn't like, I need to get warmed up a little bit, which we saw in the beginning of the season. She was going at it, like popping threes, getting to the rack. She was Juju and Jujuing from the beginning, which was fun to watch for the game. And I think Paige was like, all right, I'm going to match this a little bit.
USC as a whole just were crashing the offensive glass so hard. As much as you said Juju was ready to go and took shots and knocks him down, it's another level when the four other people, or three even, are also just crashing the glass, where it's suffocating as a defense, where you have to try to find people to block out, and they're coming in guns hot, full speed, and you have to be ready for that intensity as well, and like get a box out, turn around, rebound. Yeah, they came out strong for sure.
Yeah, and I loved that Paige was straight up guarding Juju.
I know.
It was amazing on that end of the floor. Like that, it made, when Juju was playing her one-on-one ball and looking to score, it made it that much more entertaining, because you could tell Paige put it on her shoulders, put it on herself, like, I'm going to shut this girl down the best I can. And so that was kind of cool to watch that matchup. If you look on UConn side, so we've talked about this a lot, where UConn maybe doesn't have as many scorers. Right? You've got Paige that scores a lot. You've got Sarah Strong, freshman post player, who scores a lot. And it was kind of the story in the first half there a little bit. In the first quarter, 11 of the 15 points come from those two. And I really thought SC, yes, Juju is going to Juju, but I thought that their offense, there was more people involved.
For sure.
And I think that's like a big difference down the stretch when I think about UConn. And when we had done our picks a week ago or so, I'm like, I'm solidly putting UConn in the Final Four. And I think they're going to have to figure some of that out, because it's going to be hard for them to get out of the Sweet 16 and the Elite Eight with some of these really good other teams that are out there, and the amount of other good teams that are out there, if they don't have more people showing up and consistently scoring. But anyways, really in the first half, UConn slow start. I think that's the big thing for me, for them. We watched them come out in the third quarter, and they look like a completely different team.
Absolutely.
And that speaks to what Gino is able to do at halftime. Yeah, he wants his team to play the full 40 minutes. He talks about it in the presser. Like, we look like two different teams tonight. I don't know who's going to show up. But he was able to say what he needed to say at halftime to get them going. And they know the moment, right? They know they got to turn it around and show up and play the next 20 minutes, or else it's an embarrassment, right? USC was ready to do that, I thought, coming out of that first half. It could have went that way. You also see some of the maturity of a Paige Beckers and what Gino is able to bring as a coach to turn that around and make the second half a playable and a winnable game for them down the stretch.
It's crazy when these great teams, these are great teams, when they go on their runs, and as then that's basketball is a game of runs, they're big and they're like intense. And when UConn goes on a run in the XL Center, it's deafening. It's paralyzing. It's just
you could hear the crowd. When they cut it to 6, I was like, oh, I think UConn's going to keep going here and win this thing by 10. Like, and they're still down. Yeah, I'm with you.
And I think when UConn played Notre Dame, Gino was like, hey, We need other people to step up. We need other people to score. And as you mentioned, we're talking a lot about Paige and Sarah. Ashlyn Shade had a really great game against Iowa State, right? She was insane from the 3-point line. She helped a bit here in this game with that mid-range pull-up, and I think that was smart for her. KK Arnold as well. Paige used it just to drive. They had a nice little weave going with Sarah kind of coming, posting up inside, them pulling out to the 3 to get Kiki out of there, because USC is so big and athletic inside that mid-range game was money for UConn, because they didn't go in too deep to where they'd get blocked. And honestly, USC was, they finished the game with 7 blocks. So they're athletic enough that they're, at times Juju even had three fouls, and she was going up contesting shots and swatting it into the stands. So that just tells you the level of drive and confidence that team has defensively, regardless of how many fouls. That's at a point where, as a coach, you trust in their players. And I also think that's super risky to do, especially on the road versus UConn at the XL Center, to be in close to foul trouble. And it worked for them. I'll say that.
It did. And USC was hot that first half. I mean, they went 7 for 11 from the 3-point line. They shot 64% in the first half. UConn only shoots 22%, 2 for 9. So do I think that UConn played absolutely horrible in the first half? I don't. I just think USC was hot. Yeah. SC was ready to go, like we said. So that was big. They were up by 13 at half. And then at some point, around halfway through the third, SC was still up by 16. But then, you could notice the pace change.
Yeah.
And you could just feel UConn being like, oh, no, this isn't going to go down like this. And that's when they started scoring a couple of buckets. You mentioned it. The XL Center is erupting. They have that home court, true 6-man feel going on, which I thought was huge. And then you've got back-to-back threes from Shade and Beckers that cut it to 6 with about 2 minutes and 30 seconds to go in the third. So they go on a 10-0 run in a 2-minute span.
Nuts. Absolutely nuts.
So we talk about maybe UConn not having a ton of big dynamite scorers, but we still got to remember these are some of the best athletes in the country that are going to go play at UConn, who can flip the switch when they need to. And that's where you see a Shade step up and be like, yeah, we're not losing this game. They flipped the switch almost in the third quarter, which they can't rely on. It made the game tighter. It made it more fun to watch. That fourth quarter was so intense because they were able to go on that big run. And like you said, these deep runs that they're able to go on during this whole time. And obviously there's that 10-0 run span. But in the second half, Iriafin, to me, her seniority and her calmness, I mean, she made some buckets down the stretch where she was facing up, squaring up to players. She's making counter dribbles, spinning around defenders, getting shots off, tough shots, making them down the stretch. It was huge. So she made a tough move and a bucket with 1 minute to go in the third. And then she comes out in the fourth quarter and she makes back-to-back buckets. That is solid when UConn has a lot of this momentum and the crowd was going nuts. And if you watched Iriafin go to work, it wasn't Juju necessarily at that point that was putting the game on her back. I thought Iriafin kept them in it when UConn was ready to just totally take the lead and keep running. That's to me where I'm like, yeah, this Kiki girl is for real.
Mm-hmm. Well, and then the amount of pressure that UConn was putting on Juju, just bringing the ball up, they were sending 2 to 3 people at her at times, right? So getting points from Kiki it should be part of and I'm sure it is, but part of the game plan all the time, period, because you need to have the level of respect from the defensive end to have help side there, have them in tune in the game and not just all focusing on Juju with the ball, because that will you get Kiki going, then that pressure comes off of Juju. She's able to play a bit more. Then you get Kennedy Smith going. So I think sometimes Juju brings so much hype and energy and attention, rightfully so, respectfully so. But I think USC is still, and I think I said this a couple episodes ago, I think they have to get another guard, Kennedy Smith coming back is absolutely going to help them. But somebody else that can come in, knock down those consistent threes that are going to be open, because all eyes and all the attention is going to be on Juju, then Kiki. I think that would just help in general. And I don't doubt that's on the game plan and they're working on it, but I'm just saying it's something to make them a bit more than a 1-2 punch. It gives them something else.
I'm with you. I think Avery Howell is probably chomping at the bit a little bit.
Absolutely.
She's one that can step in that role.
It was
great
to see her come in. Come in and like, I haven't seen her in a lot of games, but come in, knock down shots and bring that level of intensity. So I agree with you completely. Avery Howell, great job, girl.
Yeah, and huge atmosphere. That's a huge game. Maybe you're not playing as many minutes as those other players, and you got to step into this game and play UConn on the road down the stretch and come in and play solid minutes. She did her job, right? We talk about stepping up and playing your role. She did a really good job at that. So for me, I had some key takeaways. The first one I'm going to mention, and I think we can circle back because I think it's a fun discussion point. Free throws were huge. UConn, they didn't really capitalize on it to me, right? They get to the line 17 times. They only make 10, which is 59%. 10 for 17. You're a UConn team. You shoot 59% from the field. That's huge when you lose the game by 2. SC only gets there 6 times. They make 5 out of 6. So we're gonna circle back there. The other 2 things that I wanted to mention was that first half lead for SC. That was big. UConn wins the second half though, right? 41-30, and USC 7-11 from threes in the first half. That just really was huge for them. And then for me, the third thing was some of these star-studded players did not disappoint. You see them show up on these big spotlight games, and it's just a true testament of how great some of these players are. And that's Beckers and Watkins and Strong and Iriafin. All 4 of them have monster games to me. Sarah Strong has 22. Paige Beckers has 22. Sarah Strong has 13, right? So she has a solid double-double there.
Sarah Strong had 5 assists as well, with a ton of pressure on her shoulders. And I don't want to bring up the free throws at the end. That didn't make or break the game, right? UConn had them on the ropes, had way more free throw opportunities other than just those 2 down the stretch. But Sarah Strong is strong as shit. I mean, she's good. Every time I watch her, I'm like, oh my gosh, she's a freshman. She's going to be another one of those Tina Charles, just those solid, amazing post players, Nafisa Collier, that UConn is just going to get better and better. And it's going to be scary. It's going to be absolutely scary.
Yeah, 5 assists, 4 steals for her. I mean, her entire stat line is just, stacked.
That's a post player. That's your 5.
Yep, stepping out, draining threes. She's just so versatile for sure.
Yep.
And then on the SC side, Iriafin has 16 points, 11 rebounds. She had 6 assists. And you've got Juju, obviously, huge game for her, 25 points, 5 assists. I just thought that was great how all 4 of those players, to me, stepped up. And it's so entertaining to watch. They rose to the occasion in playing in that Saturday night primetime game. That's what you want to see, is players showing up for that. And I thought that was pretty cool. Let's circle back to free throws. What were your thoughts?
Okay, so I'm going to be the typical, the refs, right? But I found it interesting, and I could tell Coach Gottlieb was on them. And I could also tell from being in this position, she was telling her players, and her players were trying to tell one another, play through it, make it with a foul. They were just, because it's an intense game. And I think, everybody's going to try to pinpoint one thing, but I did find it interesting that in the middle of the third, the foul count was USC 12, UConn 6. And you could say, well, Becca, in the Notre Dame game, it was also equally as bad. I get it. But I'm going to tell you, the end of the game, it evened up, and it was 15-12. UConn had 15, Notre Dame had 12. The end of this game, and this is what's crazy, middle of the third, I checked it with 1 minute left in the fourth. USC still had their 12 fouls, and then UConn had 11. So they did even it up, but they weren't shooting fouls. This wasn't anything on the run, getting to the free throw line. They still only got 6 free throw shot attempts. And UConn, to get to the line 17 times, I think you got to take advantage of that. You got to take advantage of that. Because if you're at home court, The XL Center is an intense place to play. You have 16,000 fans. It's a sellout. We can talk about all the hype. Nike dropped new shoes, especially for both teams. Everyone watches women's sports. I mean, this was the game. This was hype. And I'm not saying UConn didn't live up to it. I'm just saying there absolutely is things in the stat sheet where they could have. And to only have it be a 2-point game. Another fun little stat I had was USC's 3-point shooting versus ranked opponents is usually terrible.
Yeah.
So versus Ole Miss, they were 1 for 11. Versus Notre Dame, they were 1 for 13. And I think it was like almost before halftime, they were 6 of 10.
Yep, they were on fire for them.
So I think, right, little pieces of what we've talked about of, having players step up when Juju taking more shots. I thought it was awesome just to see that growth. I hope that continues for them. Again, I think blocks was huge. USC had 7, UConn had 2. And then just the last thing I wanted to highlight is Marshall for USC. She's not going to come in and give you 30. She's not going to come in and give you 20. But that girl gave you 6 points and 9 really important boards down the stretch. Tall, lengthy post player, got in there, brought it, was intense, protected rim when UConn was down the stretch trying to get easy buckets around it. And I just think she played really well and absolutely made a name for herself in this game.
Yeah, awesome. I hope that we see some of these matchups again in the tournament.
Absolutely.
And I know this was kind of that grunge revenge match for USC because UConn knocked them out last year in the tournament. So you've got some of those returning players that are like, oh, we want to win this one extra because of that. And so it just makes it fun for our game when you've got some players that return and you want to beat the team that knocked you out. Like that's just being a competitor. And I thought USC walked in with a little bit of a chip on their shoulder from the get-go, wanted it. Not that UConn didn't, but SC was like, yeah, you're not beating us twice in a row. Not on back-to-back big stages, which I thought was kind of fun, kind of cool.
Yeah. No, and it was great to see USC's fight, right? I just think certain games, especially against the ND game, you saw Juju go one-on-one, and it didn't really work out for them. I think the second half, when Juju was getting so much pressure from UConn, it was really great to see Kiki knock down shots, Marshall get easy bunnies, just little pieces putting it together. So they made it a game and got the win on the road in a really tough environment.
You just gave me a good idea to what we should title this episode. It should be Fight On, because that's the USC, like, they say fight on. That's it. Because they came out with that fight. Right?
Yeah.
Like, we're going to fight on. There we go.
Yeah.
But I hope this becomes a normal, regular thing that we're seeing this. And we've been seeing some of these matchups for years. Like back when I played, we had the toughest schedule in the nation all the time. Like that's what good coaches are going to do. To be the best, you've got to be able to consistently beat the best. Mm-hmm. And I love that some of these coaches are not shying away from that. And it really does continue to separate the game. We talk about Nebraska. Mm-hmm. We talk about Ohio State. We talk about some of these programs where, not to knock Kevin, great guy. He's been there for 12 years. To turn the corner in your program, you've got to schedule a tougher non-conference in the beginning and put yourself on the map by actually beating one of those teams.
Absolutely. Anything else you want to highlight in this game? Because that little piece makes me want to jump to our fourth quarter, because that's exactly where I was going to go with it.
Go for it.
All right. So going to our fourth quarter, we have an upset. Upset alert. Number 9 Duke lost on the road to an unranked USF, 56-65. Jumping into what Sid said, if you want to get better and you got to play great teams. USF so far has played a hell of a tough schedule. They played South Florida. They only lost by 6. They played Louisville. They only lost by 4. They lost to Mississippi State by 7. So USF, their record is 7-6, but they're going out and taking shots and trying to see where they fall. And for Duke, I think this was one that was before Christmas, not ready to go. Again, offensively for them, it was a real struggle. I do want to highlight USF for a couple of things. 13 of their 15 scholarship players are from abroad.
Wow, that's so crazy. There's a lot of languages I'm sure that they all can speak. That's cool.
So and I'm not going to by any means guesstimate this, but a lot of times, so when I was in Finland, girls from the national team. They're sprinkled out amongst all the professional teams over there, so they do speak English. So I don't know, but that would be insane. The cool part about this is there's fans at USF that hang the flags from every country that these girls are from.
That's
13
so cool.
of them. And these girls aren't just, I'm going to highlight them and where they're from because I think it's awesome. In this game against Duke, Sammy, she's from Ohio, so that's she's not abroad, but you know what I mean. So she had 23 points, 6 for 9 from the floor and 3 for 3 from 3-point. Then we have Lore, she's from Congo. She had 17 points, 11 boards. Carla, who's from Spain, 10.6 boards, and Vittoria from Italy, 10 points. And this is their whole roster. I'm talking Spain, Italy, France. I mean, like, how awesome to go recruiting abroad, pick this team, give these girls this opportunity, and then have them all gel together in the USA playing ball. I just think that's absolutely awesome. And it's something that is unique. And to see them have success against some of these teams, playing South Carolina, Louisville and Mississippi State, I know they've been up and down in the polls, but to get a win against number 9 Duke, that's a big deal.
It's a very big deal. It's top 10 opponent. And it's Kara Lawson, and Duke's been getting a lot of hype this year. But it speaks to what Duke is missing when you look at the stat line. And Reagan Richardson, if she's not scoring 18 plus points in that game, Duke's losing.
Yep.
They don't have the scoring at all compared to some of these really top 10 teams. So it's interesting if Duke's going to be able to crack that top 10 again. I maybe don't see it heading into ACC play. Not if they're going to play like they did and Reagan Richardson only shows up half the time. And not knocking her, she's a fantastic player. I think she needs some help.
Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of their players, like starting 5, had 8, 9, 7. So it's enough but you have to have somebody like their best player in the game that came in that had double figures came off the bench. And that was Toby, right? And she had 11.7 boards. Georgia Tech just had Danny coming off the bench giving you 20. So in games like this, you have to have some sort of something, a spark to get you going if your starting 5 is a bit out of it. So just a few highlights. 3-point wise, Duke was 4 for 17, 24%. USF was 5 for 9, 56. Fast break points, Duke had 4, USF 12. And at one point, USF was up 23 points on Duke.
Wow.
You need to look in the mirror like, what just happened? And I'm not saying USF shouldn't have won or didn't have the right, Duke just being a number 9, they're 10-3 now. We've mentioned how they need more offense from somewhere or more consistency. They were trying to bring that on the defensive end. To give up 65 and to have USF have 4 players in double figures, it's a go home, go to Christmas break, come back ready to work because we're going to get after it. I think that's what that conversation after that game was.
Oh, I know that feeling. That's
gross. I hate it.
That's not a fun feeling. All right. So let's go ahead and wrap this episode. So in our first quarter, we talked about Ohio State giving that butt whooping to Stanford. Second quarter, we talked about Nebraska losing to Georgia Tech. Third quarter, we talked about that USC UConn matchup, and boy, did it live up to the hype. USC winning that one by 2. In the fourth quarter, we highlighted that upset, Duke losing to USF. And with that, we have one more score update that we want to give, and we can go ahead and conclude.
Yep. So we highlighted in last week's episode about the UCLA versus Creighton game. Creighton kind of was on a roll, had a couple good games, wasn't really sure how they would show up against UCLA. We were hoping they would take advantage of the opportunity. Lauren Betts was out, but UCLA did end up winning and beating Creighton 70-41. So UCLA took care of business and lives on to fight another day.
Remains that number 1.
Yeah.
All right, Beck, we'll go ahead and conclude. Thanks everyone for tuning in and listening. Please remember to download and follow us. We're excited to continue to be able to walk through a lot of these games and heading into the new year and all the conference play. We're super excited about it. Follow us on our social medias. Send us any type of DM or message. We'd love to do another Q&A, team huddle, which we will do in a couple weeks here and highlight some of your questions. So send those our way. And with that, we'll say goodbye here. We'll talk to you soon, Beck.
Awesome. See you, Sid. That's the 28.5 final buzzer for today's episode. Don't forget to hit follow on your preferred podcast platforms to catch every play-by-play. New episodes drop each week throughout the season.
If you've enjoyed our courtside chat, drop us a review or follow us on our social media accounts. And remember, from females who have played the game, the size of the ball matters.